let's continue on with drainage benefit assessment districts areas. And a lot of the questions that got asked of crews earlier about how the districts are managed or who pays for what, we're going to talk a little bit about right now. And this is a follow-up from last month. When last month we started talking about the agreement that the city of Santa Clarita formed with the Regional Water Board relative to the water that was being pumped out from under Shangri-La, the 70,000 gallons a day, and then being discarded in the river. And the Regional Water Board got upset and said, you know, the water's not good enough quality to put in the river. We pumped it right out of the ground, didn't do anything with it, put it back on the ground. They said, not good enough. And the city formed an agreement. We talked about it last time that said, what we're going to do is we're going to pay $816,000, $399,000 we were going to put in an escrow account to be used for a supplemental environmental project, and $417,000 would go to the Regional Water Board for some of their forward projects. But when we discussed that last time, it brought up the fact that those two drainage benefit assessment areas are not self-supporting, that they're going in debt. And the questions of how it was being managed financially was the question that came up, and it ended up in a meeting that I had with Ken Striplin and Kevin Tenoyan to discuss how this happened, and I want to share it with you because we're peeling the onion back as to how these things are being done, and at some point in the future, we'll have all those layers peeled away, and we're going to go find out if it's absolutely an acceptable method of doing business. So just as a little friendly reminder, all of the districts we're talking about are Proposition 218 assessment districts. And Proposition 13 started out, it limited how much you can increase property tax. If you have any relatives that live back east, and relatives that live in New York and New Jersey, there's little municipalities. The only way you can tell you moved from one city to another is you cross a boulevard. And every time that they're short of funds, they just raise property taxes. And that was starting to happen here in California, and Proposition 13 put a stop to that. And to give you an idea of how bad it is, I have relatives that were living in New York and New Jersey, and their homes are surprisingly less expensive per square foot than what we have out here. And the total value was about the same as my home, and they were paying close to $20,000 a year in property tax. So, you know, bless Proposition 13, it's really helped us. But at the same time, it put a bind on city governments of how they were going to finance things. So Proposition 218, the Right to Vote on Taxes Act, is the answer to that issue. Now, some people ask the question, and so I'll give you the answer. We are a general law city, and California general law cities cannot pass taxes. So when you hear when city council elections come up, and you hear some city council candidate say, we've never voted to increase taxes, well, that's absolutely true because they can't generate any taxes. A little bit of a misrepresentation. But what they can do is they can look at Proposition 218 for the collection of a fee for a specific service. And they form that district using what's called property owner protest ballots, meaning that you turn around in a Proposition 218 assessment district, it's not a tax for the general benefit of the public. It is a fee to provide a special benefit to the properties in the district. So everybody doesn't get one vote. You get a weighted vote depending upon how much property you have. And then when the item gets proposed, everybody gets noticed with a little white letter that's in that district. And if you return 50% plus one vote, you stop it. Anything else, it passes. So it's extremely hard to stop a Proposition 218 assessment ballot. Now, part of this is you have to define that special benefit, and you must spend the monies collected on the activities that you define as what form the district. So, for example, let's say that we formed a district on one side of town to maintain a certain piece of properties, and we formed one on the other side of town that took care of some other properties. They may not be equal. You can't use their money to pay for them. You can't use their money to pay for them. You can only use that money in the area that you have defined to be appropriate. And you must not charge, this is very interesting, all this will come into this discussion, you must not charge more than required to support the services provided. So you can't turn around and charge double and say, well, I'm just going to come up with a big reserve fund. Your reserve funds are very limited in a Proposition 218 assessment district. Now, I'll give you some examples of ones formed by the city and ones formed by the county. And again, the rules for a Proposition 218 assessment district is they must be within the municipality forming the district. So from the city formation, we have landscape maintenance districts. And by the way, there are 55 landscape maintenance districts. Someone was talking about the medians in the center of the roadways, and that is, the district is called 2008-1, and it maintains all of those medians, and we'll talk about what kind of financial shape it's in as we go through here. Another one is the stormwater district. It's the district that takes care of any waters that end up in the streets that then flow to the river, and there are requirements on the permit of what that quality of that water has to be and what the city has to do to maintain it. Now, if you remember, a while back, the county was talking about a Clean Water, Clean Beaches Act. You remember that? And that was to carry that one step farther because they were confident that a new permit was going to be, requirements going to be put on us, and we weren't going to be able to meet what we were supposed to do at that particular time. One of the most recently formed districts is the open space. Everybody calls it the open space district. It is not the open space district. It is the open space and parkland preservation district. And that's important because even though the district has been formed now for 7 or so years, and they have only bought open space, they could buy active parkland. 10% of the acreage purchased can be active parkland, and so on and so forth. Then there are drainage benefit assessment areas. Those are areas, there are 9 of them in the city. I'll show them to you in a minute. Those are areas where, for one reason or another, we have to account for water passing through or passing underneath particular properties. There's 3 districts where we actually pump to get rid of water, and there are other districts that we build culverts and other things to get rid of water. There is a tourism marketing district that the hotels agreed to form, and they charge an extra fee, and if they're trying to promote tourism. And if you've heard it recently, there was an attempt, I don't know if it's dead, but there was an attempt in Newhall to form a business improvement district. And that's where all the businesses in Newhall would contribute monies, and that would be used to promote activities going down in Newhall. Now, for some examples of the county's district, is the formed districts, is the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District. The Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District, as you recall, has a board with 3 people on it, 1 county supervisor and 2 people from the city of Santa Clarita, which is approximately the ratio of the land in the city and in the unincorporated county. But it is a county district because it extends outside the municipality of Santa Clarita. And the other one is that I use is the fire district. So we don't actually have a fire department. We don't really have a Santa Clarita fire chief. We name somebody as that because a general law city is supposed to do that, but in reality, it's all part of the Los Angeles County Fire Department, and that's the way it goes. Different than the sheriff's department, because the Sheriff's Department is not a district. We contract with the Sheriff's Department. A little bit different in the way things work. In our drainage benefit assessment areas, remember that the area or the district must provide that special benefit to included properties, okay? And every year, it generates an engineer's report which defines the district. In this case, they're calling it areas, but if you actually look at the report that comes out every year, in some places they call it an area, in some places they call it a district. And it defines the district, it defines the services that are going to be provided. I'll show this to you a little bit in one of the districts here. And then it talks about the yearly assessments that are going to be created. And if in fact you're forward-looking and say, you know, I'm doing this work for this particular part of the community, and I know that the price is going to escalate over time, they'll add in fee increase criteria, yearly fee escalators. And most of the time when you hear that, you hear them talk about, I'm going to generate an escalator based on the consumer price index. And so the city now has decided to combine all 9 of its drainage benefit assessment areas into one engineer's report. It makes a lot of sense to do that from a standpoint of what it takes to go generate, rather than have 9 reports that they all copied and pasted most all the same information. But they've carried it one step farther. So that yellow bar is just indicators of what we talked about last month, and how I'm just trying to lead it in so that refresh your memory so that we know where we are. These are the drainage benefit assessment areas in Santa Clarita. Again, we're focusing on number 6 and number 18, which are the 2 in Shangri-La. And we're doing it strictly because it led us into the idea that those districts were in the red, but they're not the only district in the red. You'll see later that 4 Oaks is also in the red. And we want to know where that money is coming from. How do you continually lose money on every year that you put stuff together, and you're still accomplishing the services? So here we are. There's the discussion about those 2 districts, and we're really going to concentrate on those 2 simply because they were our focus of attention before, but it shows you an example of exactly what's going on. This comes straight out of the, goodbye gentlemen, this comes straight out of the Drainage Benefit Assessment Area Report. The top paragraph, which I'm sure you can't read from there, talks about how many pumps, how many wells, how many hydrators are in that district, and they're a little different from 6 to 18. And the bottom section paragraph, which is the same in both, says what we're going to charge you money for is for periodic inspections, for maintenance, for clean out, for annual reviews, and pump station checks, and so basically you're paying to maintain the district. So in the Shangri-La database assessment areas, and this is very common now for districts, is they're formed by the developer before anybody lives there. So the developer turns around and they say, you know what, we know that we're going to have to do some ongoing pumping because we've disturbed an underground spring or whatever it is, and this is the case here. So how are we going to pay for it? How are the residents going to keep this up once we sell the property? Because if you stop, the hillside's going to come down. And so what they do is they get together with the city and they say, you know what, we want to make this a district. And it's interesting because since nobody lives there, and since the developers own their property, guess who gets to vote on whether or not the district is formed? Well, it's the property owners, right? So it's pretty easy. It's a no-brainer. They form the district, and then it is incumbent upon the city to petition the county to collect the fee, and then the city administers it. Remember now that part of these districts were formed to pump water from underneath those communities. And they pumped about 70,000 gallons a day, and someone had to continue pumping that. But all of a sudden, the world changed. The rules changed. And all of a sudden, instead of just taking the water and putting it in the river, now you're going to have to take and you're going to have to clean the water up. So they decided to put it into the sewer system. And I have yet to find out what the exact connection fees they paid and how much they actually pay per year for that service, but I know what the bottom line numbers are. So if you go to the Drainage Benefit Assessment District budgets out of the report, I took the two lines I think that we're interested in and I made them much larger. You look at Drainage Benefit Assessment Areas 6 and 18 and you find out that they're in the red. Not only are they in the red, but they're in the red to close to $1 million. So what's going to happen? You know, what's going to happen with these things? Notice that what if you look at it, take the first one, Drainage Benefit Assessment Area 6. Drainage Benefit Assessment Area 6 collects $26,000 a year in fees, and it takes $40,000 a year to run it. Well, that says that the debt is going to increase every year from now on. And it also says in 18, they collect $44,000 a year, and they need $113,000 to run. I read the wrong number on the first one. It's 26 to 54 and 44,000 to 113. So every year they're going to go back and farther in the red. And when you read underneath in the lines there that are a little hard to read, it says that the city understands that those two areas' funds are depleted and it requires a city contribution, and that's what perked my ears. What city contribution? What funds is it coming out of? How are you paying for this? And why are you doing it this way? So it's interesting because that deficit started in 2008. And that assessment in one of the districts of $159 has not been raised since at least 2007. And the reason why I say at least 2007 is because that's how far back I pulled all the assessment reports back to 2007. And that's when I saw they went negative in 2008, I went back another year and I stopped pulling them at that point. But you have to understand that when we're moving money of this magnitude, someone has got to declare it. And the way they declared that they were going to spend this $816,000 is they put it as a small little line item in the 2011 budget, yearly budget, mid-year budget adjustment. And they just said, we're sending this money, $399,000 drainage benefit assessment funds to the Regional Water Board and $417,000 of stormwater fees to the Water Board because we agreed to do it. And that's all it said in those two lines. There was no mention of it in the first part of the staff report. You had to go into the details, and that's as much details as they gave you. So it slipped through, no one paid any attention to it, and onward we went. So finally, what I did was I went to the city council meeting, and I asked those questions. I asked, here's a revelation. I know that you formed this agreement. I know you agreed to pay this money. Where's it all coming from? And how does this work? So they at the meeting gave me no answer, except that Ken Striplin indicated he would get with me and we would discuss the issue. And it ended up in a meeting with Mr. Striplin and Mr. Tenoyan, and it was a pretty open and honest meeting, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they said. So they said they agreed that the current assessment is insufficient to meet the current operating costs and that they have not raised rates since 2007. And the reason was caused, in part, was because those two drainage benefit assessment areas were formed without yearly rate escalators included, and therefore the council cannot increase those assessments automatically. So what happens is if you form an assessment district, like the Open Space and Parkland Preservation District, and you say, as a part of this formation of this district, you can increase the fees at $1 a year, which is exactly what it says in that district. The council just once a year says, increase the fees. But if there is no yearly price escalator, like there is not in the Santa Cruz Valley Sanitation District, you want to raise the fees, you got to go back to the public and say, we're raising these fees and we're going to have another protest vote. All right? So now just think about this for just a minute. Remember, one of those districts, which is the larger of the two, is only generating 1/3 of what they need. So could you imagine, you said, well, you're paying some number now, $159 a year. We're going to have to triple it. I mean, can you imagine what would happen and how big of a commotion that would make? So instead, what they've done is that they've just waited. And so it requires going back to the community, and they've decided not to do it yet. And but when you look at the accounting, it does provide a cumulative amount of money that's been spent either over or under revenue. Because if you look at all 9 of those assessment districts, some of them are not spending as much as they're taking in, while others are spending more than they're taking in. And the city has decided that they're taking a position that since I'm managing them in one engineer's report, I can manage it as one fund. Now, I'm not sure if that's truly a legitimate way to do business, but it is the way we discussed, and it is the way they told me that they're doing things. And at some point in time, those drainage benefit assessment areas that are operating in the red will be required to repay all funds borrowed to the date whenever we get around to it, and the date yet to be determined. So here again, listen to what we're saying. Here you got a district that's, you know, coming out with a $159 fee. You got to triple it just to pay the operating cost, and then let's say we'll quadruple it. And if you quadruple it, it'll take like I think I figured it out. It was like 12 years to pay the stuff back. This would be this is just a hole that we're digging. It's getting bigger and bigger all the time. It's a problem that needs to be resolved and needs to be solved. So the other question that I asked is, are you managing landscape maintenance districts the same way that you're managing drainage benefit assessment areas? And the answer was yes. So we'll show you where the problem starts in that area as well. Okay. Another issue that the city decided was that they're taking the position to consider all yearly rate escalators as cumulative. Now remember, right now we're not saying this is good, this is bad, we're just telling you how it is. And so what they're saying is if, like on the Open Space and Preservation District, if we're allowed to raise the fees $1 a year, and this year we decide, nah, we're not going to raise them, then next year we can come back and say, well, we didn't raise them last year $1, so we'll add that to this year's stuff and we'll raise it $1.50 or $2, as long as it doesn't meet the maximum cumulative amount. And if you can see when you go into their reports that they actually track what the maximum rate is. So even if it's set as, and they don't increase it, they know what their maximum is. And I question that too, because I don't know, there is a multiplication factor involved if you don't raise it incrementally, but that's not included in their numbers. So that's the position they're taking, and that's why this year, with the Open Space and Parkland Preservation District, if you listen to me talk to them at the council meeting, I said, why are you raising these fees? For one reason, you don't need the money. You've got enough money in there. You're planning, your plans say, I want to spend, I don't remember exactly what it's, something like $2.9 million, and you have something like $7 million in the account. So why are you raising this $1.50 when $1.50 is only going to bring you $150,000? And they said, no, we need the money because, sometime in the future we might need it. Well, okay. That's the position they're taking, And let's just understand it right now. So look at the numbers. There it is. $308,000 on one district in the red. $643,000, this is off of their FY 14-15 report, in the red. And that does not include the $471,000 they took out of the stormwater district. So wait a minute now. Didn't we say for just a minute that each district had to pay for its own stuff, right? So I guess there's going to be a question as to why the stormwater district is paying for half of what was levied against the drainage benefit assessment area. And just to let you know, these are not the only 2 out of the 9 that have this problem. Four Oaks has a similar problem, but I didn't want to get it too confused. So just to be sure I heard them correctly, I wanted to make sure, this was in a meeting. I thought they were very open and honest with me. It was, in some cases, an eye-opener for them as well as it was for me. And, but I wanted to make sure I heard them correctly, so I sent them a confirming email and said, this is what I said, this is what I heard you said, so tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if what you think you said was different than what I thought I heard you say, right? Something like that, yeah. And they did not send me anything back, so I must have heard it the right way. And this just brings on more questions. And at this point, I think it's important. I think that everybody's being open about it, which is a good thing. And so there's some more questions. The one question I want to ask is, what justifies the $417,000 from the stormwater district? I looked at the yearly reports year to year, and I found one year where the debt service went down by $200,000, and I don't know how that happened. So I'd like to understand that. I'd like to understand whether or not our city attorney has blessed this method of accounting, and if they have a get well plan. And at that point, I think it's always better to listen to what some famous president said, and that you can trust but verify, and go get a second opinion to make sure that we're headed down the right track. Because there has been a few times, I know it sounds almost unbelievable, when our city attorney has sent us down the wrong path. So we'll see what happens. And we'll continue this, I think, one more time before we're ready for that second opinion. Do you have any question? Wow, question.
I guess my question would be, who has the analysis of that water, and how often are they doing the analysis of that water? With the groundwater in the river depleting, we can't even use those wells, it seems like someone should be looking at that quality of that water and seeing if we can redirect that to the rivers.
Well, I'd like to do it differently than redirecting it to river. What I've suggested that they do, and what they tell me that they're thinking about, is to take that 70,000 gallons a day, because it's right across the street from Soledad Canyon, and irrigating the medians with it. I mean, isn't that a logical thing to go do? I mean, and if you're taking the water out of the ground, then you should be able to just use it for irrigation on the ground. I don't think it takes a special permit, but they'll be talking about it now. I got to tell you, the one thing that's been very frustrating to me at the last 2 city council meetings, I've listened to Lorraine West, and Lorraine West gave this big speech about how the city has been putting purple pipe in the ground. And purple pipe in the ground is nice, it's colorful, but it doesn't do anything unless you hook it up to something, right? So if you looked at the Signal today and you read the report that Masnada gave to the industrial community about what their plans were for water, there was not one word about using recycled water other than for possibly mixing with our drinking water. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm glad I heard just before the meeting that Masnada is retiring, and it can't come too soon for me. Yes, Patty.
So it seems to me Shangri-La is getting a better deal, the taxpayers in Shangri-La, and why do you think that happened?
Well, I think what happened is that the district, when it was originally formed, was sufficient to pump the water and put it into the river. And I think that if the prices would have been increasing at a small rate, then they probably would have went back to the community, just like you go back to community for, there are others you do that with as well. But I think what happened is that, this is only my impression, no one's told me this out of the city, but I think what happened is that they ended up in this battle with the Regional Water Board. They didn't want to divulge the idea that this was happening, so they did it very quietly, and all of a sudden they found themselves in this situation. And because the bottom line number of all those drainage benefit assessment areas has not gone negative yet, coming close, the balance is now $260,000. So if they want to fix this problem, they got to fix it within 3 years, because then the whole group of districts are going to go in the red. They just elected to let this sit behind the scenes. And if you go and you look, because well, next month I'll be bringing stuff to you about the budgets. If you go and you look at the budgets, there's certain things you can tell by looking through your yearly budget. I'll show you where you can find it and how it works. And there's certain things that you can't. You have to then take the drainage benefit assessment reports and the engineer's reports and now decipher them. And to some extent, I think that the public typically isn't well versed enough in city speak to truly get a good flavor for what's going on. It takes a while of looking through this stuff and asking more questions before you know. So this is going to hit, the proverbial thing is going to hit the fan soon, and the hole just gets bigger, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. I would hate to be the one to go up to Shangri-La and say, we're tripling your rates. And you know, the pitchforks and tar and feathers are going to be coming out. Yes, sir.
I have two things. That's not on it. How do I find out where I live? Where do I find out where I live, what districts I'm in? Am I in any of these districts, I guess is the question, and how do I find out?
Well, you are. I'm sure you're in, you know, can you tell me approximately where you live?
Up Poppy Meadow on a little cul-de-sac called Oleander Court.
Okay.
So I don't know what districts are there, and I'd like to find out.
Well, you know what, offhand, I know that you're in the 2008-1 median district. Of course, you're in the fire district, and of course, you're in the SCV sanitation district, and you're in the lighting district. Whether there is another independent district that you're in, I'm not sure, but there are 55 of them. I will show you where you can find out what they are, and you can find out whether you're in any of those. The easiest way also, I'm just thinking as I'm tap dancing and thinking on my feet, all you have to do is go to your property tax bill. And when you go to your property tax bill, you'll see that there's 3 sections of fees.
That's
One,
right.
one is the ad valorem tax. One is called voted indebtedness. Those are bonds. And then below will be assessment districts, and it'll list every assessment district you're in.
Thank you. I got one more thing. I just wanted to thank you. I learned a lot, and I'm glad someone's out here doing some work for us, because I certainly don't know what the hell I would be doing, and I appreciate what you're doing, so thank you.
No, thank you.